I always tell my account managers to not reinvent the wheel for everyone, but come up with something standard that you can rely on that addresses long-term pain points of the agency.
Welcome to the Happy Clients Podcast, brought to you by Dot and Company. Whether you're a virtual assistant, an agency owner, or a client-facing account manager, we all deal with clients. Lucky for you, client management is what we do best. Now, let's dig in, chat cam life, and have some fun along the way. Cheers to happy clients.
Let's face it, proposals can be stressful. You're racing to get them out the door, double checking every single line and hoping you didn't miss something that could blow up later. And as an agency owner, you know every day you delay sending that proposal. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about Smart Pricing Table. It's proposal software built exclusively for marketing agencies, designed to help you cut your proposal time as much as 90%. And with Smart Pricing Table, you will turn your proposal process into a smooth, predictable system, giving you confidence that your proposals are accurate and professional every single time. And because you're a listener of this podcast, you will get an exclusive offer, 50% off your first 2 months. Head over to smartpricingtable.com/dot to schedule a no obligation demo and see if it's the missing piece for your agency. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Happy Clients Podcast. And today I am joined with the lovely Tiffany from Dot & Co. And we are so excited to dig into all things retention. So Tiff, why don't you give a quick intro to who you are and what you do here at Dot? I think that would be a great place to start.
Yeah, sure thing. So this is such a fun topic for me. I'm super excited because I did a lot of time in agencies at Dot & Company as a client account manager, and I picked up a lot of different retention tactics and strategies and stuff from, in real time while working there. But I am now working as a senior department manager. So I lead a team of client account managers at Dot & Company, and it's just wonderful sharing from the experiences and all the hard lessons that I had to learn myself with the team. And so I'm excited to talk about that today. It's something that I talk about every single week with my team members. And so it's a big topic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wish that retention could be this checklist that we could just give everybody where it's like, do these 10 things and you'll never lose a client again. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's not like that. It's something that has to be threaded throughout every piece of your business. And I was thinking this morning before we hopped on to record this that retention is one of these things that affects every area of the business. It's
Yeah.
not just client account managers are responsible for retaining clients. Of course, that's a
Mhm.
big piece of our role. But if sales, if we never lost a client again, what would the business look like? If we never had to worry about losing clients, what would operations look like? So it really is something that's threaded throughout every piece of the agency. And
Mhm.
so for agencies listening, I know it seems like, okay, if we just get retention down, everything will be fine, but it's how you do every piece of agency life that affects retention overall. So
Yeah.
let's dig into this because I know we have a million different things to talk about, but Tiff, why don't you kind of walk us through why retention is even important for agencies and why you coach not only account managers, but also agencies on retention as well?
Yeah, yeah. Well, retention of existing clients is first and foremost, just when looking at the business, significantly more cost effective than acquiring new business. So I was actually digging through a couple articles, and this Forbes one was really interesting. It was talking about how it costs about 5 to 7 times more to acquire a new customer than retaining an existing one. And it further than that, a modest increase in retention can actually, like a 5% increase, say, in customer retention, can increase profits by anywhere from 25 to 95%. And I was like shocked at the impact of
Wow.
that. I think people don't like actually see how focusing on the retention impacts the business growth long term, but you need to think about all the factors surrounding acquisition, like the marketing and advertising costs, the lead nurturing and conversion of that sale, and then the heavy resource investment from your team right off the hop. It's really creates this big duration of time at the beginning of the engagement where they're not even profitable for the business. And so it's costs a lot of money for agencies to just be bringing in clients all the time. So from just a business financial standpoint, retaining clients is so much more cost effective.
I
So
love that. That's wild to hear those numbers
yeah,
because, we don't think about that on the daily. And I think, especially for agency owners, all we hear out there in the agency coaching world is like get more customers, how to grow
yeah,
and scale your sales team, how to make sure that you're getting X amount of sales calls on the calendar, but we're not
yeah.
talking about retention. But
Mhm.
that really should be where we focus all of our time, right?
Yeah, yeah. And like you had said, it pours into other avenues too. When you focus on long-term retention, you're creating like these advocates for your brand, right? These like people that love you, they build up your reputation for you. And what it does is it decreases your marketing costs long term. So it actually, when you focus on retention, it decreases long-term acquisition costs for you as well.
Exactly. I love it. So let's get into some tips of how you coach our account managers because I know retention can be like this big mindset shift that
Yeah.
needs to happen, but how do you coach and mentor account managers to focus on retention?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I say this all the time to my team because it's something I had to learn the hard way. But we need to kind of retrain ourselves to understand the value that we're providing can be provided in so many different ways. I always use SEO, for example. It's because it's not easy for us to quantify the results of those engagements and translate them for a lot of clients. They just don't understand that. SEO is something that we tend to fall into, like I say, the advertising trap, where like you want to just focus on leads generated and reports. But it's really important to celebrate creative milestones along the way as wins and as deliverables that add value to the engagement long term. So anything from like the site audit to keyword research to content mapping, each step is pouring long-term equity into their site that's going to make a lasting impact. So every step of your well-researched SEO plan deserves to be a win. And we need to focus on different types of wins rather than just, keeping things transactional and focusing on, okay, the leads are the wins, and that's the only thing that we can focus on to keep this client happy and retain them.
I love that. It's like coming up with ways to wow them and to show your
Yeah.
value in different ways. That's so important. And then when it comes to bringing on new clients, so let's say a new client comes on, maybe they're SEO, maybe they're ads, and they're
Mhm.
onboarding into the agency. How do we make
Yeah.
sure the account manager is onboarding them with this long-term vision? Because I think
Mhm.
that a lot of account managers get so caught up in the to do, like the task
Yeah.
onboarding checklist, but how do we make sure that we're setting these expectations from the get-go that keep them long term?
Well, in one of my past agencies, I actually got the opportunity to work as their onboarding specialist. So I had firsthand experience of seeing the impact of what rolling out the red carpet for new clients can do. It sets the tone for the whole engagement, and it also sets your full team up for success. So it's super important to focus on doing it correctly and learning from your mistakes. I always tell my account managers to not reinvent the wheel for everyone, but come up with something standard that you can rely on that addresses long-term pain points of the agency. So, like identify areas of the scope that tend to go over, identify pieces of the contract that are often misinterpreted or bottlenecks that appear down the road often, like access items are a big one. And I find branding and voice is a big one that people like to skip over too, because they don't want to go through all the branding documents at the beginning. It's a lot of work. But down the line, if you misinterpret your client's tone of voice, it can really hurt for the client to see that it feels like they're not understood. So I'd say kind of building out a process around all of these things is super important when you first align, because a client's generally on a bit of a high when they come from the sales process. They're really excited, they're on cloud nine. And as much as we want to, keep the party going, we need to ground them a bit in the onboarding process and help them feel like everything's very transparent and they know what to expect coming next.
Hmm. So do you recommend account managers having like a presentation that they walk the client through, like an onboarding presentation and setting these expectations there, or are these things that happen
Mhm.
at different milestones?
I'd break them out into different milestones. I like to have like a funnel of a process to move people through because I find the first call so exciting and you hit them with a lot of information, they don't get it. One thing that when I was in school studying PR, my teacher would always say, it's like a quote that's really popular: say it again, say it again, say it three more times, and then your target audience will finally hear what you're saying. And it's true with clients as well. You need to have these repetitive points of contact. So a presentation is great to give them something visual that they can take away. A one pager is awesome as well to make sure that they have in their package. And then email follow-ups and conversations that you hit upon some of those key points again are going to be really important in actually driving home the point and making sure they hear what you're saying.
I love that. I'm gonna steal that saying because it's so true, right?
It's not mine.
Yeah, I love that. So, account managers are responsible for retention, and it
Mhm.
is a key piece of our role. But how do you set up the team to think like that, right? Because it can be an overwhelming expectation to be like, you're
Mhm.
responsible for retaining all of our clients. But
Yeah.
how do you get account managers on board, and how do you coach them to prioritize this?
Well, I think it's an empowering thing to know that we're owning our accounts, that we can step into something like that and make such an impact on the business itself. Because account managers shouldn't just feel like they're put into like a box, like you just have to check these things off. You really own the success of your accounts. You should be aware of when the contracts are going to be up so that you can have a plan of action a couple months in advance to be surveying and understanding what their temperature is, addressing any concerns and pain points, and really presenting the value to them to ensure that they pour over into a long-term engagement, or connecting them with other opportunities to expand the value that you're providing them by, maybe channeling them to another service offering or cross-selling and upselling to other services that would sincerely provide value to them long term. So it's this really great opportunity to show value to the agency and grow the accounts, and kind of flex your skills. So I always try to say it as like an empowerment thing. You get to own this.
hmm It's so true. And I think that once you step into that, and
Yeah.
especially as an experienced account manager, like we see this with our team because they have been through it and they have the
Yeah.
experience. But until you've gone through what it means to keep a client or lose a client, you don't have
Yeah.
that confidence. And I think that once
Yeah.
you go through that and you can step into this, it makes it a lot easier.
For
Love
sure.
it. Cool. So, talk to me a little bit about building these personal connections with our clients because
Yeah.
we are often onboarding these clients. We don't necessarily know them, and connections are built over time, and
Mhm.
it can be tricky working remotely. So, like, how do you build these connections with clients to hopefully keep them on for a really long time?
I think connections can be built very simply just by asking questions and listening and documenting those answers. I think people are afraid to ask the deeper questions. They're afraid to push a little bit more and get to know people a little bit better. And when you get a bit more uncomfortable and you're comfortable with being uncomfortable, then it's where you really start to grow in the relationships. I've had so many relationships grow because I was able to use a note taker on my calls. It's like so helpful and document some really fun little quirks and milestones. And when I didn't get to talk to the agency owner again for a couple months, I popped in and I was able to say, "Oh my gosh, like I know you moved. Like, how was that? Like, transition from living in Spain to moving to the States? And how was your sister's wedding?" And they were just like, "Oh my gosh, you listened. Like, you care. You remember that." And they were so surprised that I would remember. But I took time to write it down and then to check my notes before the next call. So I think little things like that you can use, prepare for your calls, get to know people better. And then those can pour over into long-term tactics like sending handwritten cards and gifts to celebrate those milestones as well as you get to know them more.
I love that. I love the note taker idea too, of like using that to find little things within your calls because I think you can even ask your AI note taker, like, find something fun and make a note about it,
Yeah.
which is so cool. I love that. And I think it doesn't have to be this big pressure on you as an account manager to be like, you need to build relationships from day one. It's like that just
Yeah.
happens over time. And that
Yeah.
happens with trust and asking deeper questions and remembering things and caring, and how you show up with the energy you show up for your clients is so important. So I love to talk about tactical things too on this podcast. So do you have any tools or strategies that you and the account managers use for retention?
Yeah, we've got a lot of different processes. I feel like one of the big ones is like the traffic light boards to monitor account happiness. So, kind of having that red light, green always. It's a really great way to also simultaneously pull the agency owner out of the day to day, but allow them a little bit of a bird's eye view. That's one of the things that I feel like agency owners have a challenge with stepping out is just wanting to know who's where, like what's the temperature overall. I don't need the day to day, but I just want to know, like, are we in the green across the board? And so having these traffic light boards to monitor and flag concerns ahead of clients falling in the red is one of those tools that we use quite frequently.
I love that. And that is something that whenever I'm doing podcasts or coaching, that is something that we talk about. And I
Mhm.
think the way that you just articulated it is so well. It's the agency owner doesn't need to be in the day to day learning every
Yeah.
detail, but they want to see the temperature. And
Hmm.
I relate to that as well. So that is great. Cool. Well, Tiff, I loved talking about retention. Any other tips or tricks that you want to leave our listeners with before we wrap up this retention podcast?
Oh my gosh, too many. But I'll say one little tip that I always lean on and tell people to do that's not very comfortable is get comfortable with read receipts. That's a big tactic that I've used. And every time I tell a cam to start doing read receipts, they're like, "Oh, this is so uncomfortable." But it's just simply sending a message when a client contacts you right away that's just like received, working on it, or like the team's on it, like noted. It's something that takes time to get into, but as a cam, and as I know all my cams are kind of the same way, they want to have all the answers. They want to have these beautiful formal emails where they have everything written out and everything put together. You don't have to be like perfect on every piece of communication. It's 1,000 times better to come to the table first and have addressed the issue and just let the client know, you hear them. And that pours into the happiness of the account long term. I find so much more than if they had to come to you and have that concern and feel like you didn't know that it was there. So I always work with people on trying to get more comfortable with informal emails and get used to just like sending that note that you've received it, you're in progress, whether you have the update or not.
I love that. I love that you call it read receipts. I love that because I think speed is a huge piece of retention, because
Yeah.
if people know that you are on it and you're quick to respond and that you are that person they can lean on and trust, you just build that deeper relationship. So if you're that
Mhm.
first person who's like, yep, on it, noted, quick to
Yeah.
respond, I love that personally. When you were talking about that, I was like, oh my gosh, I can think of the people who are like that. So I love that tip. And it doesn't have to be perfect, is also something that we
Yeah.
all needed to be reminded of today.
Definitely. Just show up.
Just show up and be yourself. So I love
Mhm.
it. Well, thank you so much, Tiffany, for coming on the podcast. This was wonderful. And hopefully, everyone learned a couple things. We do have a retention guide that we will link below that we have built over the years. And if you have any questions when it comes to account management, you know who to ask.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Cheers to happy clients.